Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome to part 1 of What If Deku Awakens Adrenaline. Izuku fought like hell at the games against Todoroki. What if he fought even harder? What if he learned of something new within his quirk that empowered him through pain and helped him shape a new style of fighting, of life and of thinking about heroics? One of his own, one that he could control, one that he could wield and shape to its full potential. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. After watching this video, don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Watching as the world passed him, Izuku suddenly felt insignificant. Despite his feats in the last 3 days, staring out this window at all the cars shoot by, at all the people nonchalantly walk by, at all the birds in the trees and just life in general just continue living and moving without any care about his own well-being. The world was still turning without him, and he was okay with that. In all honesty, he had always sort of realized that he was pretty much nothing in the world, especially having grown up without a quirk, which only further put him down into a pit of seeming worthlessness. But he found that the newfound fame that he had acquired from the games had just put all this into retrospect for him. But then again, that was why he needed to be a great hero. To make sure that he meant something to the world. To make sure that he could save people and places in the world. To make sure that he could use his newfound quirk to be a symbol of something great that could be looked upon and inspire others for years to come. Glancing down at his hands, gazing upon the bumps and cuts that adorned his flesh, he suddenly remembered that that was all of what One for All was about. Legacy. Izuku was already a part of something larger than himself, and to live up to that responsibility, he would have to use all the power he was given, no matter what the world threw at him. No matter the cost. Shaking his head, Izuku pushed his body away the window ledge, letting momentum carry his body further back into the hospital ward and towards a small collection of clothes that lay on his bed. Currently, he was dressed in a state of dress that could be considered complete to some, but to Izuku it just felt off on his person. The Yui standard blazer had been abandoned on the bed, and his normally tucked-in shirt was left free to the world while his red tie was left hanging around his neck lazily, with only his trademark red trainers and standard-issue pants being part of the norm for the boy. However, he was told by Recovery Girl a few minutes ago to keep his outfit like this due to the nature of numerous bandages that had been reapplied before putting the clothing on, and that any other extra layers would simply make him uncomfortable. Sighing, he spun around to pick up his blazer and bag, ready to get back to his class after 2 days of absence when he was suddenly sent backwards by an unknown force. Stumbling back a few feet, Izuku let his body reassert itself and let the blurriness of his vision vanish before looking at what knocked him over only to come face to face with a literal wall of muscle. "Young Midoriya, I have come to see you!" Involuntarily flinching at the harsh-sounding tone and volume of All Might's voice as it let loose, bounding around the free space inside the relatively empty hospital ward, Izuku tried to right himself quickly before the man. "Gee, good morning, All Might! How was your day?" Before he could finish his sentence, he was interrupted by the sound of blood hitting the floor accompanied by a large plume of smoke that rose before him. Sighing slightly, Izuku readied himself for the lanky skeletal form of All Might to emerge. Donned in a baggy shirt and tie, Toshinori Yagi lazily stood before him as blood sank between his lips. "Hey kid, how've you been?" the older man offered with a smile, rubbing away the crimson that began to drip down his chin. Smiling, Izuku stood back up and rubbed the back of his head, unintentionally running his fingers over the newly made grooves and juts in his skull. "Me? Oh, I've been fine." Chuckling slightly, Yagi placed a hand on the green-haired boy's shoulder with a smirk. "Oh, just fine, hey? I think that becoming an internet trend would have made you a little better than fine, hey Midoriya?" With unmatched speeds, Izuku's eyes shot open, and with a face dusted over by scarlet, he began to mutter and stumble over his words incoherently as his arms shook and started to blur before Yagi's eyes. "And no, that's not the case at all. Chuckling at the young boy's actions, Yagi just stood back and motioned Izuku to sit onto the bed, which he did. "I was just joking, kid, don't worry. No, I'm here to talk to you about your side effect." The green-haired boy shot up and he seemed to lock eyes with the seemingly sunken eyes of All Might, the blue masses glowing with intent and worry. "What about it?" "Well, I just wanted to know how you feel about it." Shrugging, Yagi just gestured towards the wall where several pictures of Izuku's body was located, all of them broken and battered. Somehow, just looking at his form, the new successor could tell that somehow the man felt responsible for this. It's difficult, well, sort of difficult. Difficult to grasp the situation, I guess. Shuffling around on the bed, he molded his fingers into the grooves into his hands to calm his nerves. It's just that, I've always been picked on, for being quirkless, and I guess I just learned to accept pain, learned to deal with being knocked down. So, to have this new power forced onto me that relies completely on my willingness to accept my pain is just. Once again, he found himself over his words, but now it was due to the unnatural way that Yagi just stood still and barely moved a muscle as he told him his story. Listen, Midoriya, I know all about the ins and outs of your new adrenaline power, and so, I just wanted to say that you should focus on honing one for all instead of adrenaline for the time being. Silence. What? It wasn't a horrible ask, a thing that would go completely against logic. If he wanted to grow stronger, then he should probably train with the quirk that he held already instead of investing himself into a whole new power that he just received. But even Izuku knew that he could hone both skills at once, using them in tandem with each other, so would be was All Might be asking him to only use one? All I'm saying is that one for all is a difficult power to harness, especially if you want to be able to use it without it breaking your body. And then there was the little things that Izuku could tell. How Yagi was being very nonchalant about the situation when previously he was very thorough in his concern, or how he was trying to avoid Izuku's stare always. All Might? Wouldn't it make sense for me to try and practice both at the same time? Yagi froze. I suppose you could do that. Scratching his own head, the skeletal man chuckled nervously before sighing. Alright, listen Midoriya. Out of all of the previous one for all users, your side effect is the most dangerous. I didn't mention the whole idea of side effects before because I had no clue as to what yours would be, and I didn't want you to obsess over the different possibilities, like you have done with other endeavors. He smiled. However, like I said, yours is the most dangerous of them all. So, if you are going to train it, please be cautious and make sure to. I know. Surprising both figures, Izuku spoke up with clenched fists. I understand your concern and I wholeheartedly thank you for every opportunity that you have given me. But now I have something to call my own. My own quirk that is completely my own, and to make sure that I don't rely on you constantly, I need to train with it. I need to hone any skill that I have, no matter the cost, no matter the difficulties. When I was younger, I would have given the world for a quirk like this, so I must train hard to give everything given to me back. Looking up, he locked eyes with Yagi once more. And that starts with you and your quirk. Izuku, ring ring. Looking up, both figures noted that the bell signaling the beginning of class had begun. Yagi was about to respond again, but he was interrupted by another voice. Alright Nori, I need to give Izuku one last look over before he goes on his way, so if you mind. Quietly stepping into the room, Recovery Girl made her presence very clear. Giving one last look towards Izuku, All Might just muttered. Yeah, sure. Remember, young Midoriya, that you shouldn't always have to be the one in pain to relieve others of it. Patting him on the shoulder, he promptly left, leaving Izuku with some thinking to do. After a short while, Recovery Girl gave Izuku a sympathetic look before going through with his checkup. And now, Izuku's feet felt weighted and heavy as he strode through the barren halls of Yui. His heavy footsteps seemed to bounce right off the walls and strike his form with an unparalleled amount of force, forcing him to constantly be shaking his head to with a sense of unease and worry that had begun to shroud his mind. He also had some bandages wrapped tightly around his head, arms and chest that Recovery Girl had reapplied to the point where they were just constricting enough that he could resort to thinking about the pieces of cloth instead of the crushing realization that had come about in the last few hours. Idly wrapping and unwrapping the bandages around his deformed and messed up visages of flesh, the green-haired boy allowed his mind to go back to a few moments ago, to the point where he began to feel this intense amount of burden and pressure. Thinking back on what he just witnessed at the medical bay, Izuku just walked up to a nearby wall, the shine present in the pristine white material before the boy let his head collide with the construct as an attempt to clear his mind. It didn't. Instead, a sharp jolt of pain fluttered through Izuku's body, causing his eyes to burst open and his misshapen fists to fold in on themselves into some sort of fighting stance. Somehow, he could also feel the heat of his skin, how it skyrocketed for a short moment against the cool and cold material of the wall before it all went back down. It was like coming down from a high. It was just exhausting. During the checkup, Recovery Girl learned that his body had become more responsive to pain, with the new side effect of one for all pushing the idea of fight whenever any sort of pain shook his body. A semblance of pain wouldn't activate one for all though, and for adrenaline to activate he needed to reach a certain threshold of pain, of which he hadn't discovered yet, but his body would prepare itself for the quirk's use just like now. His body would attempt to get into a fighting stance subconsciously, and his skin would begin to heat up like when the quirk was used. It was strange development, just like this whole scenario, but the very idea that his body was wanting him to fight was something that concerned him the most. It wasn't like he liked the feeling of pain, but if he was going to be a truly great hero, he would just have to get used to it, or learn to like the feeling. Biting his tongue, Izuku backed away from the wall, smirking slightly at the collection of condensation left on the wall from his sudden leap in body heat before turning on his heels and calmly moving down the corridor to his homeroom. Finally, he made it to the door. Taking a deep breath, he tried to open the door as quietly as he could, as to not to draw attention to himself. Fate was a cruel bitch, however. Instead of opening it quietly, it not only made the loudest squeaking noise that Izuku had ever heard, but the sheer size of the thing gave him away almost immediately. Cringing at the noise and how every single tone of voice that he could faintly hear outside of the room went cold and silent, Izuku just awkwardly wandered into the room with both his eyes closed. He got into the room and slowly opened his eyes to see what the class was like. Before him stood a dazed and confused class, all of which held expressions of surprise at his sudden appearance, and two teachers, Aizawa and Midnight, who looked at him with amusement. Glancing back towards his classmates, he offered a small wave in the door frame. He DKU, surprising the teen the most out of anyone in the room. Izuku barely had time to react as Yurika leapt at him from her chair, colliding hard with his chest to the point where he almost fell over backwards as he used the door frame to help stabilize himself. After recovering, he felt his whole body light up, not only from the slight jolt of pain that he felt when the southern girl hit his already injured chest, but also at the fact that Yurika was hugging him. Yurika was hugging him. He just froze, unable to even complete the hug, and he just held his arms slightly behind her back in fear of doing something wrong, as she just held onto him tighter. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see some of his classmates giggling at the show while some, most prominently Mineta, stood open-mouthed at the display. Hell, even Midnight was laughing at his expense. After a while, he sort of just muffled down a few words to the shorter girl. Hi. You're an idiot, you know that? Wincing at the amount of pain and anger in her voice, he tried to quickly come up with something to retort the statement, but instead it just came off as a quiet mess of jumbled mumbles that he was commonly known for. It got her to laugh though, so he didn't feel too bad. After a while, she let go, and when he finally got to look at her face, he could help but just think how beautiful she looked. Her cheeks, which were usually rosy anyway, held a rich tint of red, and her eyes were closed with the few hints of tears present in the corners alongside a beaming smile that he couldn't help but follow suit with his own small smile. Ahem. A rough cough caught Izuku's attention, and both his and Yurika's gaze fell onto Aizawa, the man grinning one of his sickly smiles at the pair. At this, the southern girl took that as her cue to go back to her seat while trying to ignore the poking and prodding of her friends as she went. Meanwhile, Izuku wandered up to the man, wanting to know what the heck they were doing in class. It's nice to have you back, Midoriya, and to know that you're actually alive after that stunt you pulled, the eraser quirk user quickly stated, leaving the green-haired boy to only awkwardly chuckle at his stupidity. A damn headbutt. Well, we just started a few minutes ago, so I'll have Midnight explain what you're doing. Sinking back into his sleeping bag, Izuku then turned to the 18+ rated hero herself, with the woman offering a strange sadistic smile. Hello Izuku, you put up a good fight at the games, maybe a little too good for your own well-being, but a good fight nevertheless. Say, I heard that your quirk, or at least your new thing, relies on pain. She licked her lips at the boy, sending a strange shiver down his spine. If that's true, do you think that you can demonstrate it later? Behind him, Izuku heard the quiet murmurs of a jealous Mineta and Kaminari as he tried to quickly get himself out of this strange situation. I don't think that would be very good right now. He opted to look down at the floor. Don't worry, I'm only teasing. Well, the others have just been working on their hero names. At the sound of that, Izuku's head shot back up with a certain childlike look of wonder in his eyes. We'll be revealing them to the class in about 10 minutes, so go ahead and think of them. She offered him a whiteboard, a pen, before telling him to go sit down. Twisting on his heels, the teen tried to avoid all forms of eyesight from everyone in the class. However, he got his eyes caught on one person, Bakugo. The angry teen was glaring at him with such intensity and anger that Izuku felt like he had killed the boy's family. But he knew that it was completely due to how he injured Todoroki in the games, or about how he was an internet trend. Oh yeah, his entire class, no, probably the entire school had seen that on the internet by now. Sighing, he quickly caught a glimpse of Todoroki after Bakugo huffed and turned away from him. After giving the boy a small nod, to which he got the same in return, he noted to himself to talk to the boy after the lesson. And so, the lesson went by for a few minutes, with thousands of possibilities swimming around Izuku's head. Since he was younger, he had thought of so many names that revolved around his idol, around All Might Jr., Super Might, All Man. He had thought of it all. But now that he had the man's power flowing through him as well as the fact that this new power was completely his own, he felt as though taking his name was something wrong. So instead, he began to brainstorm new ideas revolving around pain, regeneration, about getting back up after being knocked down no matter what. After a while, people started to come up and present their names. The first up was Aoyama, the prestigious and fancy-looking boy, deciding to present his name like it was some sort of super serious presentation. All around him, Izuku heard criticism about the performance, but the teen decided to wait until his name was revealed to criticize. That was quickly thrown out the window when the name was revealed. I can't stop twinkling. Was that even legal? Like, could a hero name be the equivalent to a short sentence? Surprisingly, Midnight accepted it, leaving everyone dazed and confused at what actually constituted as a name. Next up was Mina, who strode with her usual confidence and cockiness. Her hero name came down to being the heroine of Ridley Alien Queen. Subsequently, it was shot down, but Izuku couldn't help but feel bad for her when it was shot down. It actually sorts of fit idea that the pink-skinned girl had been going for this whole time pretty well. On her way back, the two had met eyes and he had noticed that she had waved at him, with a light dust of lilac of her cheeks. Whatever the hell that was about, Izuku wouldn't know. Then came a stream of names after a rather good one from Tsuyu with Froppy, the heroine that kicks off the rainy season, which cemented the clean and friendly aesthetic that the frog quirk user was commonly associated. This was followed by Kirishima's name Red Riot, which was actually based off of the old hero Crimson Riot. So it was actually a really cool naming idea, which actually had Izuku considering the All Might idea for a split second before going back to more logical and grounded names. After that came another long list of names, ranging from the really good such as Anima or Charge Bolt and Creati to more, well, unique names like Earphone Jack and Shuto. After being told to change his from Baron of Explodo Kills, Bakugo sat back down and Izuku soon realized that it was only him and Ida left. In his head, he had gone through a whole list of interesting and cool names based around his quirk, but none of them affected him like he thought they would. He thought that he would feel empowered and strengthened by the name, while still being able to use it as thing of empowerment for other people, but all of them just sounded off to his ears. Then Ida chose his name of Tenya and it was all down to Izuku. And it hit him. The name that meant so much to him, in both a negative and a positive way, that practically had driven the path of his life since preschool. A name that could be paired with his themes and ideas around his quirk. A name that could empower Izuku in the darkest times yet still sound powerful. A name that stood for just as much as the teen stood for himself. Standing up, Izuku proudly walked up to the front of the class with his name in hand. When he finally presented it, it got many different reactions from around the room. Shock, confusion, laughter, all of them came towards him. Even Midnight didn't sound confident in his choice. "Why, are you sure that you are okay with that, Midoriya?" Clenching his fist around the board, he spoke with no hesitation in his voice. "Yeah. Up until now, I've never really liked the name. It stood for me being weak and powerless and being able to be pushed down easily. But recently, someone changed the meaning of the word for me and blew my world wide open. I was so happy to be finally recognized and have the word changed. It stands for getting back up, even after being beaten down so many times." Glancing up, he quickly caught sight of two people in particular, Yururika and Bakugo. The former had a look of pride and happiness of her face as she smiled at him, while the latter was angry and inflamed as he glared at him. But for the first time, Izuku didn't care. Looking back at his board, he smiled at what was written in bold writing. Deku. Idly, Izuku began to trace the scars on his hands underneath their linen wrappings, watching with an intense gaze as his fingers smoothed over the creases in the bandages, patting them to his skin until he felt the jagged patch of raised flesh, hardened and cool against his normally hot body. It was soothing somehow, to know that his efforts would always be with him, that he could just look down and remember both his power, his strength, his strife and his weakness, his downfall, his fragility with a few scratches. Somehow it filled him with a tiny amount of glee. Interlocking his fingers and pulling, he let the loud cracking sound shoot out into the environment before Izuku looked around the environment. Dragging his field of vision around the classroom, he noted that they were still on the English question that they were on a few minutes ago, when he had first started playing with his hands, and that most of the class was still working on their question. It was some simple translation, nothing too difficult for Izuku, so he had just been daydreaming for a while, letting his mind escape and recap what had been happening to him recently. Present Mike was quiet for once, allowing him to think clearly, and the only sounds surrounding him were the little grumbles of Bakugo alongside the tapping of pencils against the desks, which helped the rhythm in his head a surprising amount. Gazing across the sea of seats once more, his eyes caught onto the sharp gaze of Tsuyu Ajui, who was staring at him with a certain level of seriousness and concentration that the green-haired boy swore he could see lightning shooting towards his face. Tilting his head, he quirked an eyebrow in her direction, hoping that she could see it and subtly tell him what was wrong. Instead, when she saw his confusion, she simply blinked once, smirked, wrote something down on a ball of paper and threw it at him. Due to him being a row behind her, it wasn't that hard for him to catch. Unwrapping it, he leaned forward a bit to try and see what the frog quirk user had written, her scraggly writing hard to read. Eventually, however, he got it, just trying to figure out where all the muscle goes. Like a pandemic of red across his whole form, Izuku recoiled at the comment with his chair following his movements, resulting in a sick screech. Glancing down, he noted how his body had gotten back into its messing with bandages mode, where his arms were bent and subconsciously flexing, straining the material of his shirt slightly. With a quiet, jumbled stutter, he looked up to see the triumphant and smirking face of Ajui, her tongue out of her mouth in a sort of mocking fashion before returning to her work. Meanwhile, Izuku just found himself rooted to the spot by his own body's lack of movement as he tried to figure out what to do. In fact, now that he thought about it, a bunch of people had been acting weird around him today. It was only one period before lunch, meaning that they had had 3 periods before this, and during that time he noted himself being stared at a bunch, by both males and females alike. First, in homeroom, it was Mina and Yururika who both turned away as soon as he clocked them. Then it was Maths, and during that, he noticed Ida examining his hands as he sat next to him, while also asking him about his condition, which wasn't actually that out of the norm. But he also saw the stare of Kirishima, Kaminari and Mineta as they talked in the corner of the room, with 2 of the group glaring at him for some unknown reason, while the other just looked perplexed and confused. Finally, there was modern literature with Cementos, in which he caught sight of Yururika once again, this time alongside Jairu and Momo, the latter 2 not hiding their appearance when they noticed his presence. And now there was Ajui. What was with everyone today? However, a quick refresh of his memory alongside the message on Ajui's note told him everything in a matter of seconds. His fight with Todoroki and all the repercussions that had come about from it. Pulling his hand to his face, he roughly sighed into it, relishing at the movement of the soft linen on his skin as he began to reminisce about sad event. How it had put him in this state. He could only think about how the train ride home was going to be, or even how lunch was going to be in a few minutes. Glancing back down to his books, he took note of the small notebook that he had acquired from Recovery Girl before he left. He picked it up. Inside, it held a vast number of ideas and tasks that he had appointed for himself. There was the long list of alternative hero names that he had thought of during homeroom, several medicine names provided to him that would help with pain if he felt any, and then a longer list of new discoveries about adrenaline. Humming to himself, Izuku smiled at his notes before quirking an eyebrow once more at what lay on the next page. New costume ideas. Ever since the discovery of his new side effect, he had been pondering about what changes to make to his costume. Yes, he still had one for all and as a result still was part of All Might's quirks, so the change wasn't needed. But the idea of having something else of his own just spoke out to him and made him feel some small sense of glee at having come up with some ideas. Also, he was thinking of ways to deal with his bone-breaking problem, how to make sure it didn't affect his body too much even during the small healing boost he got from using adrenaline. He had thought of a simple arm brace, one that would trail down from his more easily damageable ligaments, but he then relented, arguing that this could limit movement and that he could simply rip it off during his weird, devil-may-care phase seen in his fight with Todoroki. Then, It was grips that attached to his elbows, but the same problems arose. Sighing once again, he leaned back into his chair, thinking of how to even customize his costume. After all, he didn't know anyone that could effectively alter it. Wait. Yes, he did. Leaning up, he began to think back to the games, to the round with the headbands and how him, Yuruka, Tokoemi and Mei had gotten into the next round. Going back on his knowledge, he could recall that was in Class 1H and had a quirk that let her eyes zoom in and out to allow her to see better. However, what he was most focused on was the fact that she used machines and mechanical properties in her suit and gadgets to help her through the competition. If there was someone that could help him out with his costume, it was her. Going through his head, he recalled her telling him that she usually hung out with Power Loader at the workshop they had on school grounds and they had lunch next so he could visit her then. Nodding to himself, he spent the last 2 minutes just staring at the clock, all the while trying to ignore the feeling of eyes running up and down his body. Ring ring. Letting out an involuntary sigh, he watched as the rest of the class stood up and stretched from their translations before turning to their friends to begin casual conversation that was always around during lunch. President Mike gave a quick notice to place the papers on his desk if you were leaving, which everyone practically was. Following suit, Izuku stood up and made his way to the door, giving his teacher a quick goodbye as he did. Now in the hallway, he suddenly found himself very lost. Where was the workshop? Freezing in place directly outside the room, he started to focus on trying to figure out where it was leading to his habit of mumbling under his breath to come back, causing the few students that were left to turn to him in confusion. Izuku? You alright? At the sound of his name, the boy's head shot up to meet the eyes of Mina, a sense of daze and amusement in her tone as she looked upon him. Also, judging by the floating mess of clothes standing next to her, he quickly deduced that Toru was with her. Me? Oh yeah, I'm good, just trying to figure out where the workshop is. Standing back up from his hunched position, he placed his hands on the back of his head, smoothing his hands over his cracked head again, causing him to grit his teeth when he did so. However, he did miss the subtle shift in the yellow iris of Mina as she glanced at his curled arm with a smirk. The workshop? Why do you need to go there, Izuku? Turning to his side, he quickly noted that now Toru was speaking, her softer voice feeling quite close to his ear. And as it turns out, she had moved from her spot next to Mina and was now standing next to him, her skirt swishing alongside her blazer's sleeves. I need to upgrade my costume. My new thing doesn't really work with my old suit, he replied sheepishly, letting a thin veil of red dust his cheeks as he spoke, subconsciously turning away from the invisible girl. Oh yeah, we haven't asked you, have we? Mina spoke up, turning to Toru as she did. Ask what? Oh. Yeah, about that super cool, awesome thing that he did at the games. What was it, Izuku? Why did you suddenly go all raw? I'm such a badass, huh? Quickly forgetting her confusion, the invisible girl quickly shuffled back to the front of him and began to jump up and down before him, causing her clothing to begin to fly and jostle. Well, it would take some time for me to go through it all. Trying to ignore the slight jab at his not badassness, he chuckled slightly. Oh, well, I know where the workshop is so I can take you there while you explain your new thing to us, alright? The pink-skinned girl next to the duo quickly spoke up once more, excitement about his new side effect leaking through her words. Thinking it through, Izuku quickly agreed to go through his new side effect, making up a cover that it was just some new aspect of a regular strength quirk so that he wouldn't reveal anything about one for all on accident. As they were walking, with the only boy in the trio making his over-the-top hand signs and arm waving as he went through the new abilities he had procured, he found out that the girls were actually really interested in the topic, more so than he actually had previously thought of. Over the last term, Izuku hadn't really spoken to them much, instead choosing to stick with Ida and Yuruka for much of it as that was generally what was easiest for him. But on the few occasions that he found himself enjoying their company. Like right now, they were completely different from him. Both were some of the most extroverted and out there people he had seen in his whole life, and that was pretty hard to do with the ever-evolving world of quirks and the like, while he was one of the surest kids in the whole class with a quirk that he couldn't even use properly. Plus, the fact that he looked like he had been copied and pasted from a very plain background from an anime didn't help, while both Mina and Toru stood out from the crowd in their own way, whether that be with the bright color of their body or their lack of a body. They were just so different to him that he felt sort of entranced when they talked and spoke to him. They were giving him an insight into life that he definitely couldn't be a part of in his current state. So, your power practically relies on you beating yourself up to get a power up? That's harsh, man. Like real hardcore. Mina quietly quipped as they walked, whistling to herself at the end after Izuku had finished his explanation. One thing that he had noticed about Mina was her broken up use of language and slang, which was something that he really didn't experience a lot, but it was a nice break from his usual stutter-whine nonsense. Yeah, pretty much. He laughed along with her as he thought about her words, how it was probably the tamest way that it could be described without being painful. Wow, you're really cool now then, huh? Toru spoke up once again, reminding Izuku of her presence. I wouldn't say that. Oh, come on, man! You're super cool now. You got this awesome quirk that absolutely rocks. You've got this real sweet personality. And not to mention your muscles. You are so cool, Izuku, and don't you forget it! Leaping before him, Mina began to act like some sort of army drill sergeant about being cool. Waving her hands in front of Izuku's face alongside the raising of her voice made the boy go bright red. Well, that and the fact that she mentioned his muscles again. WLI. Oh yeah! You have all these muscles, don't ya? Where the hell have you been hiding these all this time, huh, Izuku? Now it was Toru's turn to have a go at him, her swaying clothes stopping abruptly to poke her finger into his upper pectorals, prodding them as if to test that they were actually real with a tone of voice that sounded genuinely offended at the fact that he hadn't ripped off his shirt and told the whole damn class about his muscles. And somehow, all of this just made Izuku melt into a tsunami of red blushes and stuttering as he tried to find a way out of this situation. However, fate seemed to smile on him as the two girls began to giggle at his incompetence. Well, here we are, muscles, the workshop. Pausing in her stride, Mina gestured to large two-doored room to their left where a lot of noise seemed to be accumulating from the inside. Funny how he didn't notice it earlier. Ignoring his previous embarrassment, he turned to the two. Well, thanks for showing me here. It means a lot. They both shrugged him off. Nah, it was no biggie really, the pink-skinned girl retorted, crossing her arms under her bust. Yep, we're happy to help, the invisible girl added, her clothes swaying once more. Seriously though, oh yeah, you ain't too worried if we tell everyone about your Quirk's new shtick, right? No? Okay, thanks. Bye. Before he could even respond, he noted that the two had run off to the cafeteria, giggling the whole way there. Slumping over, Izuku sighed as he knew that he was going to be getting a bunch of questions during the hero activity that they had last period. Cautiously, he wandered over to the doors. Judging from all the noise of machines and tools from inside, he knew that the girls had actually taken him to the workshop, and not just some random place of the school to make fun of his incapability to socialize. Walking up, he was about to knock on the door when suddenly, all the previously erupting from the room stopped abruptly. Quirking an eyebrow, he was about to open the door to check what was up. What the? Boom! In about 5 seconds, Izuku realized that he had been thrown clean across the corridor by some unknown force, landing flat on his ass with a thud. His ears were ringing too, a loud piercing sound that he could help but wince from a newfound weight that covered his body. From his squinted eyes, he could also see that there was smoke wafting around the air alongside the swinging of doors. Eventually, his ears stopped ringing just in time to hear the crackly voice of Power Loader. This is why you have to be careful, god damn it. This is like the 5th time this week. Shaking his head, he tried to push himself up but Izuku found his body trapped beneath something, or more accurately, someone. Glancing down, the green-haired teen felt his whole body freeze up for the umpteenth time today as he stared down a head of messy pink-haired, curved and cutting into his chest with their softness. There was also a pair of goggles staring back at him, the dark lenses reflecting his eyes back at him like a distorted mirror world before continuing to gaze at his attacker. This person was female, he could clearly tell, and the fact that he could feel it didn't help. Decked out in a loose tank top and some sort of working pants and boots, the figure began to shift in his lap. Hee Loader bot, this is just a happy accident, cause now I know not to dash. Pushing her own body up, Izuku soon found himself face to face with the piercing yellow eyes of Hatsume, the crisscrosses being a clear giveaway as well as the smirk that adorned her face. Oh hey, it's you! Welcome Izuku! Smiling at the boy, she began to rise from his form, giving Izuku an unfortunate glance as she did so, causing him to recoil and begin muttering under his breath as he tried to calm himself down while Mei finished rising from her human seat. Suddenly, he found a hand thrust into his face. He stared at it, confused. What? You wanna stay on the floor or something? Even in her voice, the inventor's smirk was present in her tone as the boy looked up to see the same smirk adorning her pretty face. Quickly he took up the offer. As he stood, he saw the small form of power loader skulking off further into the back of the lab as he stood with Mei. Thanks, he muttered quietly, removing her hand from his as he stood. So, what brings you to this humble abode, hey hotshot? She asked, placing her hands on her hips as she stared him down with a smirk. HM? Oh yeah, I'm here to talk to you about a possible costume upgrade? In an instant, he saw as her eyes lit up with wonder and curiosity. Oh, an upgrade? Yeah, I say help you with that. Come in. In a matter of a few seconds, Izuku found himself ushered into the workshop via a slight push to his back by the girl before she ran ahead into the shop. Following her lead, he started to look around the place. All around him, Izuku saw different cut-up parts of machines and robots with wires and cables hanging out haphazardly from each one alongside a few fully built models that were blinking lights of varying colors or rotating in circles on the desk. Paired with this was a lot of loud banging of metal and cutting of scrap that the boy would consider painful, if he wasn't the owner of one for all. Eventually he made it to the center of the room with Mei. Alright bucko, what are you looking for? Pulling himself out of the daze he was in, he began to address her. Well, I recently just learned about, what I did at the games, right? He quickly questioned, quirking an eyebrow at her. Oh, you mean when you went and messed that lovely body of yours up and then you got back up and screwed it up even more? If so, then yeah, I remember. He couldn't help but sigh. After a quick explanation of his abilities, he saw that she went into a comatose of thought for a few seconds. So, what are you actually looking for? It should have been a simple question, it wasn't. Honestly, I have no clue. I just want something to complement my powers, honestly. Maybe something to reinforce my body, I guess? He just shrugged his shoulders at her as she continued her thoughts. You thought about braces? Arm braces? Yeah, but they'd restrict my movement too much, and even if they weren't, I'd probably just rip them off if I get too serious. Yeah, you're right, you did get real aggressive in that fight. How about full body armor? I got a sample if you want a test run. Walking away, she quickly wheeled in some heavy-duty looking armor, with heavy patches and panels that would efficiently cover his entire being in defense. Looks a bit too much for me, if I'm going to be honest. Scratching the back of his head, he began to look around the room for inspiration as Mei quietly listed off options in the background. All around him, he saw clamps and grips that could work, but nothing solid. However, soon his eyes landed on a suspended piece of gear that caught his attention. It was a golden frame by the looks of it, for a similar battle suit to what Mei had just bought out. However, this one was just a wire frame. It was simple, with only one thin wire leading down what would be the arms down to a bendable section at each elbow, then to a palm-sized circle in the center of where the hand would be on each side, with 5 other wires leading off it where the fingers would be. It didn't have legs, however, only containing a metal line that would go down the spine. To be honest, it looked exactly like the wire frame of a drawn character, like a manga character or something, but there was just an aspect of it that caught Izuku's eye. Walking closer to it, he reached out to touch it before Mei caught him a little too late. Oh, you might want to be careful of that. It has, ouch. After encountering the material, he found a section of his linen cut by something, as a few drops of blood started to poke out through his skin. Alongside this, he felt the heated skin and rush of energy before they subsided. Holding his hand, he examined the material a bit closer with his eyes. Along the outside of the wire were hundreds of tiny grips and clamp-looking materials made of sharp metal. Yeah, I tried to warn you. This is a skeleton that we put inside the suits. The grips secure it to the inside of the suit and give it extra protection, so they usually aren't exposed like this, and they are never facing the skin. Sorry about that. Then, that sparked an idea in Izuku. You said that these clamps and grips attach it to the suits, right? She nodded. How deep would they go if they were to go into human skin? Mei flinched. Oh, if we go with the longest model, to the bone, I think? To the bone, huh? That's it. Turning to Mei with a face full of inspiration and concern, he spoke of his idea. Theoretically these grips could secure a broken bone while sacrificing the skin to make contact, correct? So, what if I had a similar schematic for my own costume? Because if I'm going to be using my power, then it will just heal after coming out, and even the initial burst of pain would help boost me to that initial boost of power. Looking up from his hand, he saw the concern on her face. So are you saying that you'd be willing to have something like this on your body to achieve your boost? You sure you're okay with that? Looking back at the frame, he clenched his hands. If I'm going to overcome this power and be a truly great hero, then I have to do anything. I have to overcome this pain and this will help me do it. Twisting his body, he stared right into her yellow eyes with such determination and conviction that it made Mei shudder. Can you help me do that, Mei? She paused for a few seconds then giggled. Alright then, hotshot, let's get to making your scar suit. Scar suit? Heh, not a bad name. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination.